Question 1. The analysis reveals that a network engineer is tasked with deploying a Cisco ACI fabric for a US-based financial institution. A vendor proposes a configuration change that, while simplifying the initial deployment, appears to bypass certain security validation steps recommended by Cisco's own best practices and potentially conflicts with US financial data security regulations. The engineer is under pressure to meet a tight go-live deadline. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure both project success and regulatory compliance? Option A. Inform the vendor that their proposed configuration is unacceptable and refuse to implement it, without further investigation or seeking alternative solutions. Option B. Proceed with the vendor's configuration, but document the deviation from best practices, hoping that no security issues arise before the next scheduled audit. Option C. Implement the vendor's proposed configuration as recommended to meet the project deadline, assuming the vendor has adequately addressed security and compliance concerns. Option D. Independently validate the vendor's proposed configuration against Cisco's security best practices and relevant US financial regulations, and if any discrepancies are found, work with the vendor to find a compliant alternative or escalate for a risk-based decision. The correct answer is D. Independently validate the vendor's proposed configuration against Cisco's security best practices and relevant US financial regulations, and if any discrepancies are found, work with the vendor to find a compliant alternative or escalate for a risk-based decision. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where a network engineer, responsible for implementing and managing a Cisco ACI fabric, faces a conflict between a vendor's recommendation and established security best practices, potentially impacting compliance with US regulatory frameworks relevant to data security and privacy. The professional challenge lies in balancing vendor relationships and perceived immediate project needs against long-term security posture and regulatory adherence. The engineer must exercise sound judgment to ensure the ACI implementation meets both functional requirements and the stringent security and compliance mandates applicable in the US. The correct approach involves prioritizing security and compliance by thoroughly vetting the vendor's recommendation against established US cybersecurity standards and internal security policies. This aligns with the principle of due diligence, which is a cornerstone of regulatory compliance in the US. Specifically, it reflects adherence to frameworks like NIST Cybersecurity Framework or relevant HIPAA/PCI DSS requirements if applicable to the data being handled. By independently verifying the vendor's suggestion, the engineer ensures that the ACI fabric's security posture is not compromised and that the implementation remains compliant with all applicable US laws and regulations. This proactive stance protects the organization from potential data breaches, regulatory penalties, and reputational damage. An incorrect approach of blindly accepting the vendor's recommendation without independent verification represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to the introduction of vulnerabilities that violate US data protection laws, such as the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, for protected health information, or the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, PCI DSS, for credit card data. Such a failure could result in substantial fines, legal liabilities, and loss of customer trust. Another incorrect approach, that of implementing the vendor's recommendation solely to meet an aggressive project deadline, demonstrates a disregard for security and compliance in favor of expediency. This directly contravenes the ethical obligation to protect organizational assets and sensitive data, and it fails to meet the due diligence expected under US regulatory oversight. The potential consequences of a security incident stemming from such a rushed implementation are severe. A third incorrect approach, that of seeking to bypass security controls to accommodate the vendor's suggestion, is ethically reprehensible and a clear violation of regulatory requirements. This action not only introduces immediate security risks, but also undermines the integrity of the entire security architecture and demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment. This includes identifying the potential security and compliance implications of any proposed change, consulting relevant internal security policies and external regulatory requirements, seeking input from security and compliance teams, and documenting all decisions and their justifications. When faced with vendor recommendation, a critical evaluation is paramount, ensuring that any proposed solution enhances, or at the very least, does not degrade, the security and compliance posture of the ACI fabric within the U.S. regulatory landscape. Question 2. The risk matrix shows a high probability of a critical customer service outage due to an intermittent network performance issue. The network administrator suspects the root cause lies within the application's traffic flow, which is managed by Cisco ACI. To diagnose the problem effectively and quickly, the administrator believes they need to examine the raw packet data for specific customer traffic. However, accessing this data directly without explicit authorization from the customer or the internal security team would violate data privacy policies and potentially expose sensitive customer information. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Immediately access the raw packet data for the affected customer traffic to diagnose the issue and restore service, as the urgency of the outage takes precedence over policy. Option B. Escalate the issue to the security team, inform them of the suspected data requirement for diagnosis, and follow the established incident response and data access protocols to obtain necessary permissions and guidance. Option C. Advise the customer that the issue is intermittent and to report back with more specific details when it occurs again, while continuing to monitor passively. Option D. Provide the customer with direct access to the raw network logs that contain the traffic data, allowing them to perform their own analysis. The correct answer is A. Immediately access the raw packet data for the affected customer traffic to diagnose the issue and restore service, as the urgency of the outage takes precedence over policy. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents an ethical dilemma concerning data privacy and security within a Cisco ACI environment. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for network visibility and troubleshooting with the potential for unauthorized access to sensitive customer data. The network administrator is faced with a situation where a direct, albeit potentially intrusive, method of data access could resolve a critical issue, but doing so without proper authorization or adherence to established protocols carries significant risks. The pressure to restore service quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise security and compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves escalating the issue to the security team and adhering to the established incident response and data access policies. This represents best professional practice because it upholds the principle of least privilege and ensures that any access to sensitive data is conducted under controlled conditions and with appropriate oversight. Cisco ACI's security model emphasizes policy-driven access control. By following established protocols, the administrator ensures that the access is logged, authorized, and compliant with relevant regulations, e.g., GDPR if applicable to the customer data, or internal corporate policies that align with general data protection principles. This approach prioritizes data integrity and customer trust over immediate, potentially risky problem resolution. Incorrect approach is analysis. Accessing the customer data directly without authorization or involving the security team is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates data privacy principles by potentially exposing sensitive information to unauthorized personnel. This action could lead to breaches of confidentiality, non-compliance with data protection laws, and severe reputational damage for the organization. It bypasses established security controls and incident response procedures, creating a precedent for unauthorized access. Providing the customer with direct access to the raw network logs without proper sanitization or anonymization is also an ethical and regulatory failure. Customer data, even in logs, can contain sensitive information. Unfiltered access could lead to inadvertent disclosure of confidential details, violating privacy agreements and potentially exposing the customer to security risks. Ignoring the issue and waiting for the customer to provide more details, while seemingly cautious, can be professionally negligent if the problem is impacting service, and the administrator has the means to investigate further through authorized channels. This approach fails to proactively address a potential service disruption and could lead to prolonged downtime, impacting business operations and customer satisfaction, without necessarily adhering to security best practices for investigation. Professional reasoning. Professionals in network administration and security must adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes security and compliance. When faced with a critical issue requiring access to potentially sensitive data, the process should be 1. Identify the problem and its impact. 2. Assess the data sensitivity involved. 3. Consult established policies and procedures for incident response and data access. 4. If direct access is required, follow the defined escalation path, involving the security team and obtaining necessary authorizations. 5. Ensure all actions are logged and auditable. 6. If immediate resolution is critical and authorized channels are slow, explore alternative, less intrusive troubleshooting methods first. 7. Document the entire process, including decisions made and justifications. Question 3. Benchmark analysis indicates that a critical Cisco ACI deployment project is significantly behind schedule due to unforeseen complexities in integrating with existing security infrastructure. The project manager is under immense pressure from stakeholders to accelerate the timeline. While the core ACI functionality is technically sound, there are concerns that a full security risk assessment and validation against the relevant compliance framework might delay the go-live date by an additional 2 weeks. The project manager is considering proceeding with the deployment and addressing the security and compliance gaps in a post-implementation phase to meet the immediate business deadline. What is the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Proceed with the deployment as planned to meet the deadline, and initiate a post-implementation security and compliance review to address any identified issues. Option B. Implement the ACI solution with a focus on core functionality, deferring detailed security and compliance validation to a later, less critical phase of the project. Option C. Expedite the security risk assessment by relying on general industry best practices without a formal validation against the specific compliance framework applicable to the organization. Option D. Delay the deployment until a comprehensive security risk assessment is completed and validated against the relevant compliance framework, even if it means missing the initial go-live deadline. The correct answer is D. Delay the deployment until a comprehensive security risk assessment is completed and validated against the relevant compliance framework, even if it means missing the initial go-live deadline. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common ethical dilemma in IT infrastructure deployment, specifically concerning the implementation of advanced networking technologies like Cisco ACI. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate business need for rapid deployment with the long-term implications of security vulnerabilities and compliance requirements. The pressure to deliver a project quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise established security protocols and regulatory adherence. Professionals must exercise sound judgment to navigate these competing priorities, ensuring that neither security nor compliance is sacrificed for expediency. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough security risk assessment and validation against relevant regulatory frameworks before proceeding with the full deployment. This aligns with the principles of secure by design and compliance by design, which are fundamental in modern IT governance. Specifically, within the context of the 600-660 DCACIA exams, implied regulatory environment, which would typically align with general IT best practices, and potentially U.S.-based regulations like NIST or industry-specific compliance like PCI DSS, if applicable to the hypothetical scenario's context. A proactive security and compliance review is paramount. This ensures that the ACI implementation adheres to established security baselines and meets any applicable legal or industry mandates. It demonstrates professional responsibility by mitigating potential risks and avoiding future remediation costs or legal repercussions. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding with the deployment without a comprehensive security risk assessment and validation against regulatory requirements is a significant ethical and professional failure. This approach disregards the potential for introducing vulnerabilities that could lead to data breaches, service disruptions, or non-compliance penalties. It prioritizes speed over security and regulatory adherence, which is unacceptable in a professional IT environment. Implementing the solution with only a superficial review of security best practices, without a formal risk assessment or explicit validation against the specific regulatory framework, is also problematic. While best practices are important, they are not a substitute for a documented risk assessment and compliance check tailored to the organization's specific environment and regulatory obligations. This approach creates a false sense of security and leaves the organization exposed to unknown risks. Focusing solely on the technical functionality of the ACI solution without considering its security posture or compliance implications is a critical oversight. The technical implementation must be viewed through the lens of security and compliance from the outset. Neglecting these aspects during the implementation phase can lead to costly rework and significant security incidents down the line. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to technology implementation. This involves identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities, assessing their impact, and implementing controls to mitigate them. Before deploying any new technology, especially one as complex and impactful as Cisco ACI, a thorough security risk assessment should be conducted. This assessment should be mapped against relevant regulatory frameworks and organizational policies. Any identified gaps must be addressed and remediated before the technology is put into production. Continuous monitoring and periodic reassessment are also crucial to maintain a secure and compliant posture. This systematic process ensures that business objectives are met without compromising security or regulatory obligations. Question 4. During the evaluation of a complex network performance issue within a Cisco ACI fabric, a senior engineer requests access to detailed network telemetry data, including packet captures and flow records, to diagnose the problem. This data is known to contain sensitive information about application traffic patterns and potentially customer identifiers. The requesting engineer is not directly involved in the security or compliance aspects of the environment. What is the most professional and ethically sound approach to handle this request? Option A. Document the request, assess the sensitivity of the data, and seek explicit authorization from the appropriate security or compliance team before sharing any information. Option B. Refuse to share any telemetry data, citing privacy concerns, without exploring alternative troubleshooting methods or seeking clarification. Option C. Immediately provide the requested telemetry data to the senior engineer, as their seniority implies a legitimate need and authorization. Option D. Share the telemetry data with the senior engineer and a trusted colleague in the network operations team for a second opinion, assuming they can be trusted. Correct answer is A. Document the request, assess the sensitivity of the data, and seek explicit authorization from the appropriate security or compliance team before sharing any information. Explanation. This scenario presents an ethical dilemma concerning data privacy and security within a Cisco ACI environment, specifically related to the handling of sensitive network telemetry data. The challenge lies in balancing the need for comprehensive monitoring and troubleshooting with the obligation to protect confidential information from unauthorized access or disclosure. The exam's jurisdiction is implicitly U.S.-based, focusing on general IT professional ethics and common data protection principles, without referencing specific U.S. federal or state laws unless directly applicable to a broad ethical framework. The correct approach involves adhering to established data handling policies and seeking explicit authorization before sharing sensitive information. This aligns with professional best practices that prioritize data confidentiality and integrity. By documenting the request, understanding the data's sensitivity, and obtaining proper approval, the engineer upholds ethical standards and minimizes the risk of data breaches or policy violations. This proactive and transparent method ensures that data is shared only when necessary and with appropriate safeguards. An incorrect approach would be to immediately share the telemetry data without proper vetting or authorization. This action directly violates the principle of data confidentiality, potentially exposing sensitive network configurations, traffic patterns, or customer information. Such a breach could lead to significant security risks, reputational damage, and a loss of trust. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for data protection protocols and professional responsibility. Another incorrect approach would be to refuse to share any data, even when a legitimate need for troubleshooting exists, without exploring alternative, less sensitive methods or seeking clarification on data anonymization. While caution is warranted, an outright refusal without attempting to find a compliant solution can hinder critical operational tasks and negatively impact service delivery. This approach lacks the professional judgment required to balance security with operational necessities. A third incorrect approach would be to share the data with a colleague without understanding the full context or the colleague's authorization to receive it. This creates an unauthorized disclosure pathway, even if the recipient is within the same organization, It bypasses established security and privacy controls, increasing the risk of accidental or intentional misuse of the sensitive information. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Understanding the request and the nature of the data involved. 2. Consulting relevant organizational policies and procedures regarding data sharing and privacy. 3. Assessing the sensitivity of the data and the potential risks associated with its disclosure. 4. Seeking clarification or authorization from appropriate management or security personnel. 5. Exploring alternative solutions such as anonymizing data or using less sensitive metrics if possible. 6. Documenting all actions taken and decisions made. Question 5. Quality control measures reveal a recurring, intermittent performance degradation affecting a specific application tenant within the Cisco ACI fabric. While the immediate impact is noticeable to end users, the root cause is not immediately apparent, and the issue does not consistently reproduce under direct observation. A senior engineer suggests implementing a temporary, undocumented configuration adjustment on a specific leaf switch to mitigate the symptoms, arguing that it will buy time to investigate the root cause without disrupting other services. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Initiate a formal change request detailing the proposed temporary workaround, including its potential risks, expected duration, and the plan for root cause analysis, and seek necessary approvals before implementation. Option B. Advise the senior engineer that the suggested undocumented adjustment is not permissible and recommend escalating the issue for a dedicated incident response team to investigate without any immediate configuration changes. Option C. Apply a permanent configuration change to the affected leaf switch that is believed to address the underlying performance issue, bypassing the need for a temporary fix or formal change request. Option D. Implement the suggested undocumented configuration adjustment immediately to restore application performance, and document the change retrospectively after the issue is resolved. The correct answer is A. Initiate a formal change request detailing the proposed temporary workaround, including its potential risks, expected duration, and the plan for root cause analysis, and seek necessary approvals before implementation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical obligation to maintain data integrity and adhere to established operational procedures within a Cisco ACI environment. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need to resolve a performance issue with the potential risks of bypassing documented quality control processes. The pressure to restore service quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise the long-term stability and security of the network. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any deviation from standard operating procedures is thoroughly justified, documented, and approved, and that the root cause is addressed rather than just the symptom. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting the observed anomaly, initiating a formal change request that clearly outlines the proposed temporary workaround, its potential risks, and the expected duration, and then obtaining the necessary approvals before implementation. This aligns with best professional practices for network management, emphasizing transparency, accountability, and risk mitigation. In the context of Cisco ACI, this also means leveraging the platform's capabilities for policy enforcement and auditing. Adhering to these steps ensures that any intervention is traceable, auditable, and aligns with the organization's governance framework, preventing unauthorized changes and maintaining a secure and stable network infrastructure. This approach upholds the principle of least privilege and ensures that changes are made with full awareness of their implications. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing a temporary fix without proper documentation or approval represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses established change management processes, which are often mandated by internal policies and potentially by industry best practices or compliance frameworks that require auditable trails for network modifications. This lack of transparency can lead to unmanaged drift in the network configuration, making future troubleshooting more difficult and increasing the risk of unintended consequences. It also undermines the principle of accountability, as the change cannot be definitively attributed or reviewed. Applying a permanent configuration change to address a temporary performance dip without a thorough root cause analysis and formal change control is also professionally unacceptable. This approach risks introducing new issues, masking underlying problems, and violating the principle of making changes only when necessary and fully understood. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and can lead to a degraded network state or security vulnerabilities. Furthermore, it bypasses the structured testing and validation that are crucial for ensuring the stability and performance of an ACI fabric. Ignoring the issue and hoping it resolves itself is a failure to uphold professional responsibility. Network engineers have a duty to monitor, troubleshoot, and maintain the health of the network. Inaction in the face of a detected anomaly can lead to escalating problems, service degradation, and potential security breaches, all of which have significant operational and reputational consequences. This approach neglects the proactive maintenance and problem-solving expected of IT professionals. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that prioritizes adherence to established procedures, thorough analysis, and clear communication. When faced with an anomaly, the first step is always to gather sufficient data and understand the scope of the problem. Next, evaluate potential solutions against established change management policies and risk assessment frameworks. If a deviation from standard procedure is considered, it must be rigorously justified and approved through a formal process. Transparency and documentation are paramount throughout the entire life cycle of the issue and its resolution. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and contribute to the overall stability and security of the ACI environment. Question 6. System analysis indicates that a network engineering team is tasked with rapidly deploying a new set of application network profiles, AMP, and their associated endpoint groups, EPCA, within an existing Cisco ACI fabric to meet an urgent business requirement. The team has developed the ANPs and EPGs in a development environment and needs to transition them to production with minimal delay. Which of the following approaches best balances the need for speed with the imperative of maintaining fabric stability and operational integrity? Option A. Utilize a script to push all ANP and EPG configurations directly to the APIC controllers in bulk, assuming the development environment accurately reflects production and no further validation is necessary. Option B. Implement a phased rollout strategy, deploying the ANPs and EPGs to a subset of the production environment first, followed by automated validation checks and a gradual expansion to the full production environment if initial deployment is successful. Option C. Deploy the ANPs and EPGs to production and then initiate manual troubleshooting and configuration adjustments as issues are identified by end users or monitoring systems. Option D. Directly import the developed ANPs and EPGs into the production fabric using the ACI GUI, bypassing any pre-deployment validation scripts or automated testing to expedite the process. The correct answer is B. Implement a phased rollout strategy, deploying the ANPs and EPGs to a subset of the production environment first, followed by automated validation checks and a gradual expansion to the full production environment if initial deployment is successful. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge in optimizing the operational efficiency of a Cisco ACI fabric, specifically focusing on process optimization within the context of network automation and policy deployment. The challenge lies in balancing the speed of deployment with the need for thorough validation and adherence to established operational procedures, which are implicitly governed by the principles of good network engineering and operational best practices. Aligning with the spirit of the 600-660 DCACIA exam's focus on advanced implementation. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured and validated deployment process. This ensures that changes are not only implemented quickly, but also reliably and without introducing unintended consequences. By incorporating automated testing and rollback mechanisms, it minimizes risk and maintains service availability, which are paramount in enterprise network environments. This aligns with the exam's emphasis on robust and scalable ACI deployments. An incorrect approach that bypasses validation steps, such as directly deploying configurations without pre-checks or automated testing, poses significant regulatory and ethical risks. While not tied to specific external regulations in this context, it violates the implicit ethical obligation of network professionals to ensure the stability and security of the infrastructure they manage. Such actions can lead to service disruptions, data integrity issues, and security vulnerabilities, all of which have severe operational and reputational consequences for the organization. This failure to adhere to due diligence in network operations is professionally unacceptable. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on speed without considering the complexity of the ACI fabric and its interdependencies, is also professionally unsound. ACI's strength lies in its policy-driven automation, but this automation requires careful design and implementation. Rushing the process without understanding these nuances can lead to misconfigurations that are difficult to troubleshoot and can cascade into widespread issues. This demonstrates a lack of professional judgment and a disregard for the intricate nature of the technology. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a risk-based assessment. Before implementing any change, a thorough understanding of the potential impact, the required validation steps, and the rollback strategy is essential. Leveraging ACI's built-in capabilities for policy validation and using automation tools for pre-deployment checks and post-deployment verification are critical. Professionals must prioritize a systematic approach that ensures both efficiency and reliability, adhering to the principles of sound engineering and operational excellence. Question 7. Regulatory review indicates that the implementation of automated network policy updates within a U.S.-based financial services organization must strictly adhere to data privacy and security mandates. When designing an automated workflow for deploying new firewall rules to segment sensitive customer data, which approach best ensures compliance and operational integrity? Option A. Automate the deployment of firewall rules based on operational efficiency metrics, assuming that standard security templates inherently satisfy all regulatory obligations. Option B. Design the automation workflow to include automated validation checks against predefined compliance profiles and regulatory requirements before the firewall rules are applied to the production environment. Option C. Prioritize rapid deployment of firewall rules to minimize service disruption, with a general assurance that the rules align with security best practices, deferring detailed regulatory verification to a quarterly compliance review. Option D. Implement automated deployment of firewall rules with a post-deployment manual audit scheduled for the following business day to verify compliance with data privacy regulations. The correct answer is D. Implement automated deployment of firewall rules with a post-deployment manual audit scheduled for the following business day to verify compliance with data privacy regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in network automation and orchestration, balancing the need for rapid deployment and operational efficiency with the imperative to adhere to established compliance and security policies. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that automated processes, while designed to optimize workflow, do not inadvertently bypass or violate critical regulatory requirements. The pressure to deliver services quickly can create a temptation to streamline processes to the point where they become less auditable or introduce security vulnerabilities. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it integrates compliance checks directly into the automated workflow, embedding validation steps that verify adherence to specific regulatory frameworks. In this case, implied by the exam's focus on U.S. regulations for data handling and network security, the system ensures that any deployed configuration or policy change meets the required standards before it becomes active. This proactive approach minimizes the risk of noncompliance, reduces the potential for costly remediation, and maintains the integrity of the network infrastructure according to the specified jurisdiction's legal and ethical standards. This aligns with the principles of secure by design and compliance by design, which are fundamental in regulated environments. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over validation would fail to meet regulatory requirements by allowing potentially non-compliant configurations to be deployed. This creates a direct ethical and legal failure, as it violates the duty to operate within the bounds of applicable laws and industry standards. For instance, if the jurisdiction mandates specific encryption protocols or access control lists for sensitive data, bypassing these checks in an automated deployment would be a clear violation. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on operational metrics without considering compliance, would also be professionally unacceptable. While it might improve performance, it ignores the fundamental responsibility to operate legally and securely, leading to potential fines, reputational damage, and loss of trust. The failure here is a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the legal obligations inherent in managing network infrastructure. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes a risk-based approach. This involves identifying critical regulatory requirements, assessing the potential impact of noncompliance, and then designing automated processes that incorporate automated checks and balances for these requirements. Regular audits and reviews of automated workflows are also crucial to ensure ongoing adherence. The process should always involve a compliance gate within the automation pipeline, where deviations trigger alerts or halts, rather than allowing unchecked progression. Question 8. The control framework reveals that the current ACI fabric is experiencing suboptimal performance and increased operational overhead. A network engineer is tasked with optimizing the fabric's efficiency. Which approach best addresses this challenge while adhering to principles of robust network management and operational integrity? Option A. Immediately implement a suite of advanced security policies to enhance the fabric's resilience, assuming that increased security will inherently lead to better operational control. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive audit of existing policies to identify redundancies, overly complex configurations, and potential areas for simplification, followed by a phased implementation of optimized policies. Option C. Focus on upgrading the fabric's hardware components to the latest generation, believing that increased processing power will resolve all performance bottlenecks. Option D. Introduce new, experimental policy features to explore their potential benefits without first assessing the impact of current policy configurations. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive audit of existing policies to identify redundancies, overly complex configurations, and potential areas for simplification, followed by a phased implementation of optimized policies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to optimizing the operational efficiency of an ACI fabric, specifically concerning the management of network policies and their impact on resource utilization and performance. The challenge lies in balancing the need for granular control and security with the potential for increased complexity and overhead. Careful judgment is required to select an optimization strategy that aligns with the organization's business objectives and adheres to any relevant Cisco best practices or internal governance policies, which are implicitly guided by the principles of efficient resource management and operational stability inherent in advanced networking certifications like DCACIA. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it focuses on a systematic, data-driven method for identifying and rectifying inefficiencies. By analyzing the current state of policy deployment and resource consumption, a network engineer can pinpoint areas where policies might be overly complex, redundant, or misconfigured. This leads to a more streamlined and performant ACI fabric, reducing the likelihood of operational issues and improving the overall agility of the application infrastructure. This aligns with the implicit regulatory and ethical expectation of maintaining a secure, reliable, and efficient network environment, ensuring that its investments deliver maximum value and minimize risk. An incorrect approach that involves broadly disabling security policies without a thorough risk assessment is professionally unacceptable. This constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It directly compromises the security posture of the network, potentially exposing sensitive data and critical applications to unauthorized access or malicious attacks. Such an action violates the fundamental principle of due diligence in network security and could lead to severe compliance violations if specific security mandates or data protection regulations are in place. Furthermore, it demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility in safeguarding the organization's assets. Another incorrect approach, which is to implement new, complex policies without first understanding the impact of existing ones, is also professionally unsound. This can exacerbate existing inefficiencies or introduce new ones, leading to a more difficult troubleshooting environment and potentially degrading network performance. It represents a failure in systematic problem-solving and a disregard for the interconnected nature of network policies. Ethically, it shows a lack of foresight and a potential to create more problems than are solved, impacting the productivity and reliability of the application infrastructure. A third incorrect approach, focusing solely on hardware upgrades to address performance concerns without investigating policy optimization, is a misallocation of resources and a failure to address the root cause. While hardware can be a factor, policy inefficiencies can often be the bottleneck. This approach ignores the potential for software-based solutions and can lead to unnecessary capital expenditure. Professionally, it demonstrates a lack of analytical depth and a tendency to apply expensive solutions to problems that might be resolved through more cost-effective means, potentially violating fiduciary responsibilities to the organization. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Understand the business requirements and the desired outcomes of the optimization. 2. Conduct a thorough audit and analysis of the current ACI fabric, focusing on policy deployment, resource utilization, and performance metrics. 3. Identify specific areas of inefficiency or potential improvement based on the analysis. 4. Develop a phased plan for implementing changes, prioritizing those with the highest impact and lowest risk. 5. Test and validate all changes in a controlled environment before deploying to production. 6. Continuously monitor the fabric's performance and resource utilization post-implementation to ensure sustained optimization. 7. Document all changes and their rationale for future reference and auditing. Question 9. The assessment process reveals that the ACI fabric's response times for critical application services are exceeding acceptable thresholds, impacting user experience and potentially violating service-level agreements. The IT operations team needs to implement a strategy to optimize the fabric's performance. Which of the following approaches is most aligned with best professional practices for process optimization in this scenario? Option A. Immediately upgrade all hardware components in the ACI fabric to the latest available models, assuming that newer hardware will inherently resolve performance issues. Option B. Rely on informal feedback from application owners and implement changes based on their immediate suggestions without comprehensive testing or performance measurement. Option C. Conduct a thorough baseline performance analysis of the ACI fabric. Identify specific bottlenecks through detailed monitoring and telemetry, and implement targeted, iterative improvements with continuous validation and documentation. Option D. Apply the most recent configuration templates provided by the ACI vendor, without first assessing the current fabric state or validating the impact of these changes on existing application workloads. Correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough baseline performance analysis of the ACI fabric, identify specific bottlenecks through detailed monitoring and telemetry, and implement targeted, iterative improvements with continuous validation and documentation. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a critical need to optimize the operational efficiency of an ACI fabric. This scenario is professionally challenging because the rapid evolution of network technologies and the increasing complexity of application demands require a proactive and strategic approach to process optimization. Failure to do so can lead to performance degradation, increased operational costs, and a diminished ability to support business agility. Careful judgment is required to balance immediate needs with long-term strategic goals, ensuring that optimization efforts align with the overall business objectives and the specific regulatory framework governing the ACI implementation. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it focuses on a holistic and data-driven methodology. By establishing clear performance baselines, identifying bottlenecks through comprehensive monitoring, and implementing iterative improvements with continuous validation, it ensures that optimization efforts are targeted, effective, and sustainable. This aligns with the principles of good governance and operational excellence, which are implicitly expected within any regulated IT environment. The emphasis on documentation and knowledge sharing further promotes transparency and facilitates future improvements, adhering to best practices for change management and operational continuity. An incorrect approach that relies solely on anecdotal evidence or the latest vendor recommendations without proper validation fails to address the specific nuances of the existing ACI environment. This can lead to misallocation of resources, introduction of new issues, and potential noncompliance with operational standards. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness risks overlooking critical dependencies or unintended consequences, potentially causing service disruptions. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to adhere to established change management protocols. A third incorrect approach that focuses only on hardware upgrades without addressing software configurations or application dependencies is incomplete and unlikely to yield optimal results, representing a superficial understanding of process optimization within a complex system like ACI. These failures can lead to regulatory scrutiny if they result in service degradation or security vulnerabilities. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the desired outcomes and constraints. This involves defining measurable objectives, gathering relevant data, analyzing potential solutions against these objectives, and selecting the approach that offers the greatest likelihood of success with the lowest risk. Continuous monitoring and feedback loops are essential to adapt to changing conditions and ensure ongoing optimization. Question 10. Implementation of automated network policy updates in Cisco ACI, designed to accelerate application deployments, is being reviewed. The current process involves a CI/CD pipeline that pushes configurations directly to the ACI fabric. A proposal is made to streamline this by removing the automated security policy validation checks that are currently integrated into the pipeline, relying instead on periodic manual audits to ensure compliance. What is the most professionally responsible approach to managing this automated deployment process? Option A. Prioritize the speed of application deployment by removing all security validation checks, both automated and manual, from the deployment process. Option B. Remove the automated security policy validation checks from the CI/CD pipeline to expedite application deployments and rely solely on post-deployment manual audits for compliance. Option C. Implement a new, separate automated system that performs security policy validation only after the configurations have been successfully deployed to the ACI fabric. Option D. Maintain and enhance the automated security policy validation checks within the CI/CD pipeline to ensure compliance and security are enforced prior to deployment. The correct answer is D. Maintain and enhance the automated security policy validation checks within the CI/CD pipeline to ensure compliance and security are enforced prior to deployment. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in network automation and orchestration, balancing the need for rapid deployment and agility with the imperative of maintaining robust security and compliance. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that automated processes, while efficient, do not inadvertently introduce vulnerabilities or bypass established security controls. The Cisco 600-660 DCACIA exam focuses on implementing and managing ACI, which inherently involves policy-driven automation. Therefore, understanding how to integrate security and compliance into these automated workflows is paramount. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive and integrated security model by embedding security policy validation directly into the CI/CD pipeline. Any changes that could compromise compliance or introduce security risks are identified, and remediate before they are deployed to the production environment. This aligns with the principles of DevSecOps and the shift-left security paradigm, which are critical for modern, agile infrastructure management. This approach ensures that automation serves to enforce, rather than circumvent, regulatory requirements and security best practices, thereby minimizing the attack surface and maintaining auditability. An incorrect approach that bypasses automated security checks during deployment is professionally unacceptable because it directly violates the principle of least privilege and introduces significant risk. It assumes that manual oversight will catch all issues, which is a flawed assumption in complex, dynamic environments. This failure to integrate security into the automated workflow creates a gap where policy violations or security misconfigurations can propagate unchecked, leading to potential breaches and non-compliance with industry standards or internal security mandates. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on post-deployment audits for security validation is also professionally deficient. While audits are necessary, they are reactive. Waiting for an audit to discover a security flaw means the vulnerability has already existed in the production environment, potentially for an extended period, increasing the likelihood of exploitation. This approach fails to leverage automation for preventative security measures, which is a core tenet of efficient and secure infrastructure management. A further incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of deployment over any form of security validation is fundamentally irresponsible. In a regulated environment, or any environment where data integrity and availability are critical, such a strategy is a direct abdication of professional duty. It creates an environment ripe for security incidents and regulatory noncompliance, with severe consequences for the organization and the individuals responsible. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a risk-based assessment. Before implementing any automation, a thorough understanding of the security and compliance requirements must be established. Automation should be designed to enforce these requirements. This means integrating security checks, policy validations, and compliance verifications at multiple stages of the deployment lifecycle, particularly within the CI/CD pipeline. Continuous monitoring and feedback loops are essential to adapt to evolving threats and regulatory landscapes. The goal is to make security and compliance an inherent part of the automated process, not an afterthought. Question 11. Risk assessment procedures indicate that the current manual compliance validation process for new application deployments is a significant bottleneck, delaying time to market and increasing the risk of human error. The organization has recently implemented Cisco ACI to enhance network agility and automation. What is the most effective strategy to optimize the application deployment process while ensuring robust compliance and auditability within the ACI framework? Option A. Rely on post-deployment manual audits performed by the security and compliance teams to verify adherence to all regulatory requirements. Option B. Develop custom scripts that query the ACI fabric for compliance-related configuration parameters and integrate these scripts into the CI/CD pipeline for automated validation before and after deployment. Option C. Segregate the ACI network from the compliance monitoring tools, requiring manual data extraction and correlation for audit purposes. Option D. Implement a policy exception process that allows for expedited deployments of non-critical applications by temporarily bypassing standard compliance checks. The correct answer is B. Develop custom scripts that query the ACI fabric for compliance-related configuration parameters and integrate these scripts into the CI/CD pipeline for automated validation before and after deployment. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge in optimizing the deployment of Cisco ACI within a regulated environment, specifically focusing on process optimization. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for rapid service deployment and agility, which is a key benefit of ACI, with the stringent compliance and audit requirements inherent in many enterprise and government sectors. This requires a deep understanding of how ACI's automation and policy-driven model can be leveraged to enhance, rather than hinder, compliance processes. The correct approach involves integrating ACI's operational and management capabilities directly into the existing compliance and change management workflows. This means leveraging ACI's API-driven nature and its ability to enforce policies consistently to automate compliance checks and approvals as part of the application deployment lifecycle. This aligns with best practices for IT governance and risk management, ensuring that deployments are not only fast, but also demonstrably compliant with established regulations and internal policies. By embedding compliance checks within the ACI fabric and its orchestration tools, organizations can achieve a higher degree of assurance and reduce the manual effort and potential for human error associated with traditional compliance validation. This proactive integration is crucial for maintaining operational efficiency while meeting regulatory obligations. An incorrect approach would be to treat ACI as a black box and rely solely on external manual processes for compliance validation after deployment. This fails to leverage the inherent automation and visibility ACI provides, leading to inefficiencies and increased risk of noncompliance. It also ignores the potential for ACI to actively enforce compliance policies. Another incorrect approach would be to bypass or significantly loosen compliance checks to achieve faster deployment times. This directly violates the principles of risk management and regulatory adherence, exposing the organization to significant legal, financial, and reputational damage. Such an approach demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of the purpose of compliance frameworks and the responsibilities of IT professionals in maintaining them. Professionals should approach this situation by first thoroughly understanding the specific regulatory requirements applicable to their organization. This involves identifying key compliance controls and how they can be mapped to ACI's policy constructs and operational capabilities. The next step is to engage with compliance and audit teams to design an integrated workflow where ACI's automation features are used to generate evidence of compliance and facilitate automated checks. This collaborative approach ensures that the optimization of ACI processes directly supports, rather than undermines, the organization's compliance posture. Question 12. Governance review demonstrates a perceived disconnect between the agility benefits of Cisco ACI for application development teams and the operational team's concerns regarding network stability, security, and compliance within the ACI fabric. What is the most effective strategy to address this governance finding and ensure successful, unified adoption of ACI? Option A. Implement a comprehensive training and collaborative engagement program to educate the operational team on ACI's policy-driven model, demonstrating how it enhances security and compliance, and to involve them in the design and validation of network policies. Option B. Mandate strict adherence to current ACI configurations by the operational team, emphasizing that their role is to maintain the existing setup as designed by the architects. Option C. Prioritize the immediate implementation of all network change requests from application development teams to showcase ACI's agility, with operational oversight occurring only after deployment. Option D. Revert to traditional, out-of-band network management tools for the operational team's critical infrastructure segments to maintain perceived stability, while allowing application teams to continue using ACI for their environments. The correct answer is A. Implement a comprehensive training and collaborative engagement program to educate the operational team on ACI's policy-driven model, demonstrating how it enhances security and compliance, and to involve them in the design and validation of network policies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in advanced network deployments where the operational team, responsible for day-to-day network stability and performance, may have differing priorities and understanding of ACI's policy-driven model compared to the application development teams who benefit from its agility. The challenge lies in ensuring that the operational team's concerns about security, compliance, and manageability are adequately addressed within the ACI framework without stifling the intended benefits of rapid application deployment and lifecycle management. The governance review highlights a potential disconnect, requiring a strategic approach to bridge this gap. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves fostering collaboration and education between the operational and development teams, focusing on how ACI's policy model can meet both sets of requirements. This means demonstrating to the operational team how ACI's constructs like EPGs, contracts, and VRFs inherently enforce security policies and provide granular control, thereby enhancing compliance and manageability. Educating them on the benefits of a programmatic approach to network configuration, which reduces manual errors and speeds up troubleshooting, aligns with best professional practices. This approach leverages the ACI framework to achieve operational excellence while enabling agility, directly addressing the governance review's findings by promoting a unified understanding and adoption of the platform. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to simply mandate that the operational team adhere to the existing ACI configurations without further engagement. This fails to address their underlying concerns and can lead to resistance, shadow IT, or a perception that their expertise is undervalued. Ethically, it disregards the importance of stakeholder buy-in and can create an adversarial relationship. From a regulatory perspective, if their concerns relate to specific compliance mandates that are not being met by the current configuration, this approach would perpetuate a compliance risk. Another incorrect approach would be to revert to traditional network management practices for the operational team segments, bypassing ACI's policy model. This undermines the entire purpose of implementing ACI, negating its benefits of agility, automation, and consistent policy enforcement. It creates a hybrid, complex environment that is harder to manage and troubleshoot, increasing operational overhead and the potential for misconfigurations. This approach represents a failure to adhere to the strategic goals of the ACI deployment and introduces significant operational and security risks. A third incorrect approach would be to prioritize the development team's immediate requests for network changes without a structured review process that includes operational input. While ACI is designed for agility, uncontrolled changes can lead to instability, security vulnerabilities, and compliance breaches. This approach neglects the governance aspect highlighted by the review and can result in a chaotic network environment, ultimately hindering long-term operational efficiency and increasing risk. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a stakeholder-centric approach, recognizing that successful technology adoption hinges on understanding and addressing the needs and concerns of all involved parties. The decision-making process should involve 1. Active listening to identify the root causes of concerns from different teams. 2. Facilitating cross-functional workshops to educate and demonstrate how the technology, ACI, can solve shared problems. 3. Developing clear governance policies and procedures for ACI usage that incorporate input from all stakeholders. 4. Establishing metrics to measure the success of ACI implementation against both operational and development objectives. This ensures that technology investments deliver on their promised value while maintaining operational integrity and compliance. Question 13. Stakeholder feedback indicates a strong desire to accelerate the deployment of a new microservices application within the ACI fabric, with requests to bypass certain security policy validation steps to meet aggressive go-live dates. The ACI implementation team is tasked with integrating this application, which approach best balances the need for rapid deployment with the imperative of maintaining a secure and compliant network infrastructure. Option A. Implement the application with minimal security policy validation, relying on the application's internal security mechanisms and planning to address any compliance gaps post-deployment. Option B. Proceed with the deployment as requested, prioritizing speed, and document the bypass security steps for future remediation, assuming the risk is acceptable given the business urgency. Option C. Delegate the responsibility of security policy implementation to the application development team, assuming they have the expertise to configure the ACI security constructs appropriately. Option D. Engage with the security and compliance teams to define and implement the necessary ACI security policies and tenant configurations that align with the application's requirements and organizational standards before proceeding with full deployment. The correct answer is A. Implement the application with minimal security policy validation, relying on the application's internal security mechanisms and planning to address any compliance gaps post-deployment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid deployment of new network services and the need for robust security and compliance, especially within the context of the 600-660 DCACIA exam's focus on advanced ACI implementation. Stakeholders, driven by business needs for agility, may overlook critical security and operational considerations. The challenge lies in balancing these competing demands to ensure that the implemented ACI solution not only meets functional requirements, but also adheres to established security policies and regulatory frameworks relevant to network infrastructure. Careful judgment is required to identify and mitigate risks without unduly hindering innovation. Correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, policy-driven implementation that integrates security and compliance from the outset. This aligns with the principles of secure network design and operational excellence expected in advanced ACI deployments. By leveraging ACI's capabilities for policy enforcement and automation, the team can ensure that security controls are consistently applied across the fabric, reducing the attack surface and improving the overall security posture. This proactive approach minimizes the likelihood of security breaches and compliance violations, which can have significant financial and reputational consequences. Adhering to established best practices and the principles embedded within the Cisco ACI framework ensures a resilient and secure network. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed without adequate security validation would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to vulnerabilities being inadvertently introduced into the production environment, potentially violating data protection regulations or industry-specific compliance mandates. For instance, if the network handles sensitive data, a failure to implement appropriate segmentation or access controls could result in a breach, leading to regulatory penalties and loss of customer trust. Another incorrect approach that bypasses established change management and review processes, even with good intentions, undermines the integrity of the operational environment. This can lead to unforeseen conflicts, service disruptions, and a lack of auditable trails, which are critical for compliance and incident response. Such actions demonstrate a disregard for established governance and risk management frameworks, which are implicitly or explicitly required by regulatory bodies overseeing critical infrastructure. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment at each stage of the implementation. This includes identifying potential security threats, compliance gaps, and operational impacts. The team should engage with all relevant stakeholders, including security operations and business units, to ensure a shared understanding of requirements and risks. Leveraging ACI's policy model to define and enforce security and operational requirements is paramount. Furthermore, a robust testing and validation process, including security testing and compliance checks, should be integrated before and after deployment. Finally, maintaining comprehensive documentation and audit trails is essential for demonstrating compliance and facilitating troubleshooting. Question 14. Investigation of the process for onboarding a new critical financial application into the Cisco application-centric infrastructure, ACI fabric, considering the perspectives of the Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, the head of application development, and the network engineering team. When the development team proposes a rapid deployment strategy that bypasses standard security and compliance validation checkpoints to meet an aggressive market launch deadline. Option A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment and security review involving all relevant stakeholders, including the CISO and compliance officers, to identify and mitigate potential vulnerabilities before granting production access to the new application. Option B. Prioritize the application's market launch deadline by allowing the development team to deploy the application immediately, with a commitment to address security and compliance issues in a post-deployment audit. Option C. Delegate the security and compliance validation solely to the development team, trusting their expertise to ensure the application meets all necessary standards without direct oversight from security or compliance departments. Option D. Implement the application with minimal network configuration changes, assuming that the application's internal security measures are sufficient and that network-level security is a secondary concern for this deployment. Correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment and security review involving all relevant stakeholders, including the CISO and compliance officers, to identify and mitigate potential vulnerabilities before granting production access to the new application. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid deployment of new network services and the need for robust security and compliance, especially within the context of a regulated industry. The stakeholder perspective is critical because different groups have varying priorities and risk tolerances. The Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, is primarily concerned with risk mitigation and adherence to security policies, while the head of application development is focused on agility and time to market. The network engineering team is tasked with implementing the solution, while ensuring operational stability and adherence to established network design principles. Navigating these competing interests requires a structured approach that prioritizes security and compliance without unduly hindering innovation. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it proactively integrates security and compliance considerations into the early stages of the application deployment lifecycle, aligning with the principles of DevSecOps and a defense-in-depth security strategy. This involves a collaborative review process where all relevant stakeholders, including security and compliance teams, are engaged to identify and address potential risks before the application goes live. This proactive stance minimizes the likelihood of costly remediation efforts, security breaches, and regulatory violations. It fosters a culture of shared responsibility for security and compliance, which is essential for long-term success. An incorrect approach that bypasses security and compliance reviews for speed would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. In many jurisdictions, particularly those with stringent data protection laws e.g., GDPR in Europe, HIPAA in the US for healthcare data, failing to conduct adequate security assessments before deploying applications that handle sensitive data can lead to severe penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for the organization's responsibility to protect its data and its users. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on technical implementation without considering the business impact or stakeholder concerns, would also be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to a solution that is technically sound, but fails to meet business objectives or alienates key stakeholders, ultimately undermining the project's success and potentially creating operational or security blind spots. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the organization's risk appetite, regulatory obligations, and business objectives. It requires establishing a cross-functional team to review new deployments, defining clear security and compliance gates that must be met, and fostering open communication channels between development, operations, and security teams. When conflicts arise, a structured risk assessment framework should be employed to evaluate the potential impact of different decisions, and escalation paths should be clearly defined to ensure that critical issues are addressed at the appropriate level. Prioritizing a collaborative, risk-aware, and compliance-driven approach is paramount. Question 15. What factors determine the appropriate segmentation and policy enforcement strategies when implementing Cisco ACI in a multi-tenant environment with diverse regulatory compliance obligations across different business units? Option A. The specific regulatory frameworks and compliance mandates applicable to each business unit, alongside their unique operational requirements and data sensitivity levels. Option B. Vendors' recommended best practices for ACI deployment, irrespective of the specific compliance needs of individual business units. Option C. The personal preferences of the network engineering team regarding preferred security models and the ease of configuration for common network services. Option D. The maximum throughput capacity of the ACI fabric and the available licensing tiers for advanced security features. Correct answer is A. The specific regulatory frameworks and compliance mandates applicable to each business unit, alongside their unique operational requirements and data sensitivity levels. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the technical implementation of a new network fabric with the diverse operational and security requirements of different business units. The challenge lies in ensuring that the ACI fabric, while providing agility and automation, does not inadvertently compromise the existing security postures or operational workflows of these units, especially in a regulated environment where compliance is paramount. Careful judgment is needed to avoid introducing new vulnerabilities or operational complexities that could lead to compliance breaches or service disruptions. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the existing regulatory landscape and the specific compliance obligations of each stakeholder group before and during the ACI implementation. This proactive engagement ensures that the ACI design incorporates necessary security controls, audit trails, and operational procedures that align with regulations such as those governing data privacy, financial transactions, or healthcare information as applicable within the exam-specified jurisdiction. By involving stakeholders early and often, the implementation team can build trust, gather critical requirements, and ensure that the final solution is not only technically sound, but also compliant and operationally viable for all parties. This aligns with principles of responsible technology deployment and risk management. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the technical capabilities of ACI without considering the regulatory implications for specific business units would be professionally unacceptable. This failure could lead to non-compliance with industry-specific regulations or general data protection laws, resulting in significant fines, reputational damage, and potential legal action. For instance, if a financial services unit has strict data segregation and access control requirements mandated by financial regulatory bodies, implementing ACI without accounting for these specific policies could inadvertently create a compliance gap. Another incorrect approach, which involves implementing ACI with a one-size-fits-all security policy, ignores the nuanced compliance needs of different departments. This can lead to either overrestriction, hindering legitimate business operations, or underrestriction, creating security vulnerabilities that violate regulatory mandates. For example, a research and development department might have different data handling and access requirements compared to a customer service department, and a uniform policy would fail to address these differences, potentially leading to regulatory noncompliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify all relevant stakeholders and their specific business and regulatory requirements. 2. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment, focusing on potential compliance gaps introduced by the new technology. 3. Engage in collaborative design sessions with stakeholders to ensure the ACI architecture and policies meet all identified needs. 4. Develop a phased implementation plan that includes rigorous testing and validation against compliance benchmarks. 5. Establish ongoing monitoring and auditing mechanisms to ensure continued adherence to regulatory standards post-implementation. Question 16. When evaluating the implementation of a new ACI fabric to support a critical business application, and a business unit manager expresses urgency to deploy the application with minimal network changes, what is the most professional approach to ensure both operational readiness and adherence to organizational security and compliance mandates? Option A. Implement the ACI fabric with default security settings and configuration, assuming they are sufficient for most applications, and document the decision to defer specific security reviews to a later date. Option B. Schedule a meeting with the business unit manager, security, and compliance teams to thoroughly understand the application's requirements, assess potential risks, and collaboratively design an ACI implementation that meets both business objectives and regulatory obligations. Option C. Inform the business unit manager that the ACI implementation will be delayed until a comprehensive, independent security audit of the entire data center can be completed, regardless of the application's urgency. Option D. Proceed with the deployment as requested by the business unit manager, prioritizing speed and minimizing network changes to meet their immediate needs, and address security and compliance concerns post-deployment. Correct answer is D. Proceed with the deployment as requested by the business unit manager, prioritizing speed and minimizing network changes to meet their immediate needs, and address security and compliance concerns post-deployment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate operational needs of a business unit with the long-term strategic goals and compliance requirements of the organization, specifically within the context of Cisco ACI and its associated regulatory environment as defined by the 600-660 DCACIA exam. The stakeholder perspective is crucial, as different groups will have varying priorities and understanding of the technology's implications. A failure to consider these perspectives can lead to misaligned implementations, security vulnerabilities, and noncompliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the business requirements and their alignment with the overarching security and compliance policies. This proactive engagement with stakeholders ensures that the ACI implementation not only meets functional needs, but also adheres to the regulatory framework relevant to the exam's jurisdiction. By involving security and compliance teams early, potential risks are identified and mitigated before deployment, preventing costly rework and potential breaches. This aligns with the principle of security by design and demonstrates due diligence in adhering to industry best practices and any applicable regulations that mandate risk assessment and mitigation for network infrastructure. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the technical implementation without considering the broader organizational context and regulatory implications is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to the deployment of a network that, while technically functional, creates security gaps or violates data handling policies, potentially resulting in regulatory fines or reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that bypasses established change management and security review processes, even if driven by perceived urgency, demonstrates a disregard for established governance and risk management frameworks. This can lead to uncontrolled deployments, increased vulnerability to cyber threats, and a breakdown in accountability, all of which are significant ethical and professional failures. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the business and technical requirements. Second, identify all relevant stakeholders, including business unit owners, security teams, compliance officers, and operations personnel. Third, conduct a comprehensive risk assessment, considering technical, security, and regulatory compliance aspects. Fourth, develop an implementation plan that integrates security and compliance controls from the outset. Fifth, engage in continuous communication and collaboration with stakeholders throughout the design, implementation, and operational phases. Finally, ensure that all deployments are documented and auditable, demonstrating adherence to established policies and procedures. Question 17. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a vendor-supported solution for network automation offers immediate cost savings on licensing compared to an open-source alternative that requires significant upfront investment in skilled personnel and integration efforts. However, the open-source solution promises greater long-term flexibility and avoidance of vendor lock-in, which approach best balances the immediate financial considerations with the strategic objectives and potential risks for the organization. Option A. Conduct a detailed total cost of ownership (TCO) analysis for both solutions, including operational costs, support, training, and potential future migration, alongside a thorough risk assessment for each before making a decision. Option B. Prioritize the open-source solution due to its long-term flexibility and avoidance of vendor lock-in, allocating budget for necessary personnel and integration. Option C. Select the vendor-supported solution to realize immediate cost savings and leverage established vendor support, deferring long-term flexibility concerns. Option D. Implement the vendor-supported solution and plan for a future migration to an open-source alternative once the initial investment is recouped. The correct answer is B. Prioritize the open-source solution due to its long-term flexibility and avoidance of vendor lock-in, allocating budget for necessary personnel and integration. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT infrastructure projects where the perceived immediate cost savings of a vendor-supported solution are weighed against the long-term strategic benefits and potential risks of an open-source alternative. The challenge lies in balancing financial prudence with technological agility and avoiding vendor lock-in, all while ensuring compliance with organizational policies and industry best practices. The pressure to deliver a project within budget can sometimes overshadow a thorough assessment of total cost of ownership and future operational flexibility. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a comprehensive evaluation that extends beyond initial capital expenditure. It involves a detailed assessment of the total cost of ownership (TCO), including licensing, support, training, integration, and potential future migration costs. This aligns with sound financial management principles and risk mitigation strategies. From a regulatory and governance perspective, this thorough due diligence ensures that decisions are not solely driven by short-term financial gains, but also by long-term sustainability, security, and compliance with any relevant industry standards or internal IT governance frameworks. This approach fosters transparency and accountability in decision-making, which are critical for maintaining stakeholder trust and adhering to ethical business practices. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach focuses solely on the upfront licensing costs, overlooking the ongoing support, maintenance, and potential vendor-specific integration complexities. This can lead to a higher TCO over the solution's lifecycle and create a dependency on a single vendor, limiting future flexibility and potentially incurring higher costs for upgrades or feature enhancements. Ethically, this can be seen as a failure to act in the best long-term interest of the organization. Another incorrect approach might be to dismiss the vendor-supported solution entirely based on a generalized aversion to proprietary software, without a proper technical or financial evaluation of its merits, and the open-source alternative's readiness for enterprise deployment. This can lead to overlooking a solution that might offer superior stability, security, or features for the specific use case, or it could result in adopting an open-source solution that requires significant unplanned investment in expertise and development to achieve parity. This represents a failure in objective technical assessment and can lead to suboptimal outcomes. A third incorrect approach could involve prioritizing the perceived cutting-edge nature of a new technology without adequately assessing its maturity, community support, or the organization's internal capacity to manage and secure it. This can lead to unforeseen operational challenges, security vulnerabilities, and increased support burdens, ultimately costing more in time and resources than initially anticipated. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to manage technological risk responsibly. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that involves 1. Defining clear project objectives and success criteria, including both technical and business requirements. 2. Conducting a thorough TCO analysis for all viable options, considering both capital and operational expenditures. 3. Performing a comprehensive risk assessment for each option, including security, operational, and vendor-related risks. 4. Evaluating the long-term strategic alignment of each solution with the organization's technology roadmap and business goals. 5. Engaging relevant stakeholders, IT operations, security, finance, business units, to gather input and ensure buy-in. 6. Documenting the evaluation process and the rationale for the final decision to ensure transparency and accountability. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are well-informed, defensible, and aligned with the organization's best interests and any applicable governance frameworks. Question 18. Benchmark analysis indicates that a new microservices-based application requiring dynamic network provisioning is ready for deployment into the existing Cisco ACI fabric. The development team is pushing for immediate integration to meet aggressive market timelines. The ACI fabric is configured with a baseline set of security policies and is subject to internal compliance audits. What is the most professional approach to integrate this new application while ensuring security and compliance? Option A. Implement the application directly into the production ACI fabric without extensive testing, relying on the inherent security features of ACI and assuming that the baseline security policies will adequately protect the new application. Option B. Deploy the application directly into the production ACI fabric, leveraging ACI's dynamic policy provisioning to automatically configure network services, and address any security or compliance findings post-deployment during the next scheduled audit cycle. Option C. Develop and test the application's network requirements and associated security policies in a dedicated staging environment that mirrors the production ACI fabric. Conduct a thorough security review and obtain formal approval through the established change management process before migrating to production. Option D. Prioritize the immediate deployment of the application to meet market demands and instruct the security team to retroactively review and adjust the ACI security policies to accommodate the new application's network footprint. Correct answer is B. Deploy the application directly into the production ACI fabric, leveraging ACI's dynamic policy, provisioning to automatically configure network services, and address any security or compliance findings post-deployment during the next scheduled audit cycle. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid deployment of new network services and the need for robust security and compliance within a regulated environment. The organization is operating under the framework of the 600-660 Implementing Cisco Application Centric Infrastructure, Advanced 600-660 DCACIA exam, which implies adherence to best practices for network automation and programmability, but also necessitates consideration of security implications. The challenge lies in balancing the agility offered by ACI with the imperative to maintain a secure and compliant infrastructure, especially when dealing with sensitive data or critical applications. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured and validated process for integrating new services into the ACI fabric. This involves thorough testing in a non-production environment, comprehensive security policy review, and adherence to established change management procedures. This methodology ensures that new services are deployed without introducing vulnerabilities or violating compliance mandates. It aligns with the principles of secure development and deployment, minimizing risk and ensuring operational stability. An incorrect approach that bypasses or inadequately performs security reviews before deploying new services into the ACI fabric represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to the introduction of security misconfigurations, unauthorized access, or data breaches, directly contravening the spirit and letter of security best practices and potentially violating data protection regulations. Though specific regulations are not cited, the implication of a regulated environment is present. Similarly, neglecting to document changes or obtain necessary approvals through change management processes undermines accountability and auditability, which are critical components of regulatory compliance and professional integrity. Failing to validate the impact of new services on existing security policies can lead to unintended consequences, such as the creation of overly permissive access controls or the disabling of essential security functions. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the business requirement and the associated risks. This involves proactive engagement with security and compliance teams early in the design phase, A risk-based approach should guide the testing and validation process, ensuring that all potential security and compliance implications are thoroughly assessed. Adherence to established IT governance frameworks, including change management and incident response, is paramount. When faced with pressure for rapid deployment, professionals must advocate for a balanced approach that does not compromise security or compliance, leveraging automation tools like ACI to enhance these aspects rather than circumvent them. Question 19. Benchmark analysis indicates that a US-based financial services firm is planning to implement Cisco application-centric infrastructure, ASI, to enhance its data center agility and support new application deployments. The project team is under pressure to deliver the new infrastructure rapidly to meet business demands. From a stakeholder perspective, considering the stringent regulatory environment for financial institutions in the U.S., what is the most professionally responsible approach to implementing Cisco ACI? Option A. Delegate the responsibility for security and compliance validation to the ACI implementation team without involving dedicated security and compliance officers, assuming their technical expertise is sufficient. Option B. Prioritize rapid deployment of Cisco ACI to enable new application services quickly, with security and compliance reviews conducted post-implementation as a secondary concern. Option C. Implement Cisco ACI in phases, with each phase undergoing rigorous security and compliance validation before proceeding, ensuring alignment with relevant U.S. financial regulations and internal policies. Option D. Focus solely on the technical benefits and operational efficiency of Cisco ACI, deferring any discussions or assessments related to regulatory compliance until a specific audit or incident occurs. Correct answer is C. Implement Cisco ACI in phases, with each phase undergoing rigorous security and compliance validation before proceeding, ensuring alignment with relevant U.S. financial regulations and internal policies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid deployment of new network services and the need for robust security and compliance, especially within the context of a regulated industry. The stakeholder perspective is critical because different groups will have varying priorities and risk tolerances. A financial services firm, for example, operates under strict regulatory oversight from bodies like the SEC and FINRA in the U.S., which mandate specific security controls, data protection measures, and audit trails. Implementing advanced network technologies like Cisco ACI requires careful consideration of how these new capabilities align with existing compliance frameworks and how they might introduce new vulnerabilities or compliance gaps. The challenge lies in balancing the business's desire for agility and innovation with the imperative to maintain regulatory adherence and protect sensitive data. The correct approach, which involves a phased rollout with comprehensive security and compliance validation at each stage, represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the regulatory requirements of the U.S. financial sector. This methodology ensures that security controls are integrated from the outset, rather than being an afterthought. It allows for continuous monitoring and auditing, which are essential for demonstrating compliance to regulatory bodies. By involving compliance and security teams early and throughout the process, the organization can proactively identify and mitigate risks, ensuring that the ACI implementation adheres to standards such as SOX, PCI DSS, if applicable, and data privacy regulations. This systematic approach minimizes the likelihood of compliance violations and associated penalties. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thorough validation would be professionally unacceptable due to specific regulatory and ethical failures. For instance, bypassing security reviews or compliance checks to accelerate deployment could lead to the introduction of vulnerabilities that expose sensitive customer data, a direct violation of data protection laws and regulations like the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, GLBA. This also breaches ethical obligations to protect customer information. Another incorrect approach, such as implementing ACI without a clear understanding of its impact on existing compliance policies, could result in misconfigurations that lead to non-compliance with reporting requirements or audit trail mandates, potentially incurring significant fines and reputational damage. Furthermore, failing to document the implementation and configuration changes adequately would hinder future audits and investigations, violating principles of transparency and accountability expected by regulators. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a risk-based approach. First, thoroughly understand the regulatory landscape applicable to the organization's industry and jurisdiction. Second, engage all relevant stakeholders, including IT operations, security, compliance, legal and business units, to gather requirements and identify potential conflicts or risks. Third, develop a phased implementation plan that incorporates security and compliance checkpoints at each milestone. Fourth, conduct thorough testing and validation, including penetration testing and compliance audits, before proceeding to the next phase or full production. Finally, establish ongoing monitoring and auditing processes to ensure continued adherence to both technical and regulatory requirements. Question 20. The audit findings indicate a discrepancy in the network segmentation policies within the Cisco ACI fabric, specifically concerning the isolation of development environments from production systems. Which of the following approaches best addresses this finding while adhering to robust security and compliance principles? Option A. Immediately revert the ACI configuration to the last known stable state documented in the change management system, assuming the audit finding is a symptom of a recent, unrecorded change. Option B. Escalate the finding to the security team for a high-level assessment and await their directive, without performing any initial technical validation of the ACI configuration. Option C. Conduct a detailed review of the existing ACI policy model, comparing it against documented security requirements and application communication needs to identify the specific misconfiguration and implement targeted remediation. Option D. Implement a blanket policy to deny all intertenant communication within the ACI fabric until a comprehensive security review can be completed over the next quarter. The correct answer is C. Conduct a detailed review of the existing ACI policy model, comparing it against documented security requirements and application communication needs to identify the specific misconfiguration and implement targeted remediation. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential misconfiguration in the network segmentation policies within the Cisco application Centric infrastructure, ACI fabric. This scenario is professionally challenging because network segmentation is a critical security control, directly impacting the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of sensitive data and applications. Incorrect implementation can lead to unauthorized access, data breaches, or service disruptions, all of which carry significant regulatory and business implications. The challenge lies in balancing security requirements with operational agility and ensuring that the implemented policies accurately reflect the organization's risk appetite and compliance obligations. The correct approach, which involves a thorough review of the ACI policy model against documented security requirements and industry best practices for microsegmentation, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and prudent network management. Specifically, it addresses the need for a systematic and evidence-based validation of security controls. By cross-referencing the ACI configuration with established security frameworks and organizational policies, the engineer ensures that the segmentation is not only technically sound, but also compliant with any relevant U.S. regulatory frameworks that mandate data protection and access control, such as HIPAA for healthcare data, or PCI DSS for payment card information, if applicable to the organization's data types. This proactive and validated approach minimizes the risk of security gaps and demonstrates a commitment to maintaining a secure and compliant infrastructure. An incorrect approach that involves immediately reverting to a previous known good configuration without understanding the root cause of the audit finding is professionally unacceptable. This bypasses the critical step of identifying and rectifying the underlying issue, potentially leaving the vulnerability unaddressed or introducing new, unforeseen problems. It fails to meet the professional obligation to thoroughly investigate and resolve security concerns, and could be seen as a failure to implement effective controls as required by various U.S. regulations. Another incorrect approach, which is to assume the audit finding is a false positive and dismiss it without further investigation, represents a severe ethical and professional failure. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for potential security risks. Such an attitude can lead to significant breaches and regulatory penalties, as it directly contravenes the expectation of proactive security management and risk mitigation inherent in most compliance frameworks. It also fails to uphold the professional responsibility to protect the organization's assets and data. A third incorrect approach, which is to implement a broad, overly restrictive segmentation policy across the entire fabric without a granular understanding of application communication flows, is also professionally unsound. While seemingly security-oriented, it can cripple application performance and availability, leading to operational issues and potentially violating service-level agreements. Furthermore, it may not be the most effective way to address the specific audit finding, indicating a lack of precise problem-solving and potentially introducing new compliance challenges if it hinders legitimate business operations without a clear risk-based justification. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve a structured decision-making framework. This begins with understanding the scope and impact of the audit finding. Next, gather all relevant technical data and documentation pertaining to the ACI configuration and the organization's security policies. Then, evaluate potential solutions against established security principles, regulatory requirements, and business objectives. Prioritize solutions based on their effectiveness in mitigating risk, their impact on operations, and their compliance implications. Finally, document the chosen solution, the rationale behind it, and the steps taken for implementation and verification. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with professional standards and regulatory obligations.